Here's how I look through a business listing to see if it's worth pursuing or not. So if you're looking to buy a business, there's a few handful of things that I look for in a listing to determine if I should fill out the information on the right-hand side to get the non-disclosure agreement so I can look at the rest of the business. So I'm going to pop my head out of the way here. And I'm just going to go through this listing top to bottom so you can see how I'm looking at things and what I'm looking for. And it'll give you a good idea of how to spot the necessary boxes we want to get checked, if you will. So just going from top to bottom, it's an established fertilization business with a real estate option. It's located in Kentucky. That's the first box for me, honestly, is the industry, right? Are we in a good industry? Are we in a pretty solid industry? Anything in that service-based industry are always tend to be really good businesses. I really like landscaping because of the reoccurring aspect of their service, right? If I cut your grass today, you're going to need a cut in 2 weeks. So you always have clients coming back for the service, which is a good sign. And then also being in Kentucky, I think we're cutting grass year round there. So that's a good sign. Looking at the numbers here, asking price, 1.195, so $1,195,000. Cash flow is $363,000. They've got revenue of just over $1 million. Inventory is $75K. Don't have their EBITDA here. And then here's our real estate option for $725,000. And then the FF&E is furniture, fixture, and equipment. That's $100,000. And then they were established in 2004. So 2 more boxes can be checked right here. The first one being the asking price. I just like to make sure we're in a reasonable asking price. And the way you do that is take the asking price right here and you divide it by the earnings metric they're using. And you'll find out the more listings you look at, we're using cash flow, we're using SDE, seller discretionary earnings, or we're using EBITDA, right? It's all over the place. I know people get confused. You'll typically see EBITDA on larger size businesses, although people still use them on smaller businesses. You could see EBITDA of $200,000, but usually you'll see this earnings metric used on businesses around $500,000, more likely $1 million and up. And then you'll see seller discretionary earnings or cash flow on smaller size businesses. And when I say smaller, I just mean cash flow or that earnings metric of $500,000 and less. It's not a rule. So you could see a business listing that says $300,000 in EBITDA. You could see a business listing of 1.2 million in SDE, right? It's not a rule. It's just what you typically see. Now, on BizBuySell's platform, cash flow is essentially seller discretionary earnings. And if you highlight this little question mark, it'll even explain it to you. It's their net profit plus any owner compensation or any owner benefits. So at the very bottom, if it says, if the net profit before taxes was $100,000 and the owner paid themselves $70,000, the cash flow is $170,000, which is essentially SDE, the seller's discretionary earnings. Now, if the seller was spending or had any discretionary expenses through the business, that would also be added on top of that net operating income if they're running a personal car or something through the business, right? So box number 2, we want to find out if the asking price is accurate or not. And we will take the asking price and we will divide it by the earnings metric. And in this case, it's cash flow. And if you do that, you're going to get 3.2. And then you can go ahead and Google, hey, what multiple do landscaping businesses sell for or lawn care businesses sell for? And you'll quickly find out that this falls in the accurate range. Now, the larger the earnings gets, the larger this number right here gets, the higher the multiple gets, right? For the most part, in this smaller business space, you'll see multiples anywhere from 2 to a 4, right? So that 3.2 falls right in the middle. I think we're accurately priced. I'm just making sure that there's nothing outrageous. It's not coming up with a 7, or an 8. That to me is way too high. Something's off. I probably wouldn't even look at it. So we're accurately priced. We're in a good industry. And then the next thing I look at is when it was established. I like to look for businesses that are at least 5 years old, honestly, probably 10 years old. So 10 years or older. In this case, we're 20, 21 years old. So that's a good sign. And the reason why is because I want a business that has gotten past that failure rate. I think it's like 65% of businesses fail in the first 5 or 10 years of being in business. So if we can get past that failure rate, that's a really good sign. And then it's just a larger sample size for us to look at. And it tells me that they've been through some ups and downs, most likely. They've probably been through some weird market conditions. So it's a well-tested business, and that's a good sign that they're at least 20 years old in this case. So third box is being checked right there. So far, I like everything I see. Then I jump down into the description, and I would read it through real quick. I've read this a few times here, so I'll highlight some of the things that I noticed that I like. Loyal customer base, over 1,200 residential clients, and an impressive annual retention rate of 89%. So that was kind of what I was talking about in the beginning about reoccurring clients. It's not really a subscription base. These could potentially be contracts, maybe annual contracts. But again, if you're cutting someone's grass, you're going to go cut it again in 2 weeks. So it's that reoccurring service, which is a really good sign to see here. And that retention rate is a really high number. So that was great. A few other things here I think I was looking at. So services include a popular 6-step lawn maintenance program. Let me just highlight this so you know where I'm at. Along with add-ons like aeration, power seeding, mosquito and pest control, tree and shrub care. So I mean, those services, just pest control businesses, I mean, those are extremely popular right now. Tree businesses are extremely popular right now. So I really like those add-on services. Maybe something you could tap into as the new owner of the business. There's limited seasonal downtime because we're in Kentucky. I think there was one other thing here. Here we go. The owners have maintained a hands-on approach, ensuring that the team is well trained and systems are optimized, making sure this is a turnkey operation for a buyer. Now, the one thing that stood out to me on that is they said owners, so that leads me to believe there's more than one owner and they are hands-on. So that would be the first thing that I would have a question about, and I may just even call the broker before filling out all the information just to ask them the owner's involvement, and the owner's involvement, in this case, multiple owners' involvement, because you have to look at it from the perspective of if you're going to buy this business, the owner or owners are going to leave this business. And so if they're generating any sort of revenue or they have strong relationships with any customers of their business, it's a little concerning because you have to then fill those shoes. And if you personally are not going to do that, right? Like if they're going out and cutting grass and you're personally not going to do that, well, you're losing an individual that brings in revenue. So you may have to replace that individual, which cuts into that $363,000 cash flow in order to do that. So my very first question, and what is now at the top of my list, is what do the owners do? What are their roles and responsibilities? How many hours are they working? If it's just one or is it multiple owners? So a few questions right there about the ownership of the business. And then this one up here, operating under a nationally recognized franchise model. I want to touch on that at the end. So if you just hang on for a sec while I get through this, I'll talk about buying a franchise or not buying a franchise and what that means. Scrolling down here, we have 5 employees. Again, that just makes my question about the ownership more important. Are the owners involved in this 5 employees number right here? And if there's more than one, are they involved in this 5? Because that makes it even more of a concern on my end, to be honest. And that's not that many employees. Let's say there's 2 owners, so that means there's only 3 employees. I don't know if that's the case. Again, this is why we ask questions. But not a ton of employees, which means every single one of them are very important. Even if there were, I'm sure all of the employees are important. But in this case, not a lot of employees, which means they're all really key employees, which can just be a little bit of a concern for a buyer. Going all down, I think we know, talking about the building, the retention rate, substantial growth opportunities. Here's another thing too. By focusing on upselling existing customers with additional services, the average annual customer revenue could increase significantly. You can expand marketing efforts, geographical expansion. So I have several thoughts on this. My gut reaction to phrases like this, which you'll see on all these listing descriptions, is why haven't they done it, right? So if there's significant potential, significant upside potential by upselling customers and increasing your marketing, why haven't you done it, right? Why have you not done it? And that the answer could be very simple. They could just be wanting to retire like it is down here, and they're old and it's just been all word of mouth business, and that's fine. But that's just my reaction. Is like, if growth is so easy the way they explain it, which it's their job to sell it, but why haven't they done it? Why haven't they upsold any customers? And why haven't they increased marketing efforts? And then the second or the third point here is the geographical expansion. Something like this is actually pretty difficult with landscape businesses, in my opinion, because there's so many landscaping businesses and you can't just continuously expand your services because you'll run into other landscaping business territories. And that's hard to beat out all these different companies that are in a pretty close proximity to where your business is. There's thousands of landscaping businesses. So expanding geographically, if you're going to try and take over the entire state of Kentucky, is going to be a very difficult task unless you just start buying out all these other landscaping businesses. And then along with this being a franchise, you most likely are stuck to your territory unless you buy another license that's in the area. So I don't know if geographical expansion is really going to be a growth component that we could focus on with this business, but I could be wrong. I don't have all the information in front of me. Lastly, down here, financing, $141,000 down to buy the business or $218,000 down to buy the business and the real estate. This tells me that the broker here has probably already talked to an SBA lender about this deal. The reason why I say that is because you can buy businesses with a 10% down payment to get an SBA loan. Now, 10% would be $119,500. And in this case, it is $141,000. So it's about $20,000 more than 10%. And that's because banks add their fees, right? You are going to pay fees for this loan, and it's just going to be tagged on top of it. So when I talk to people, I always tell them it's a 10% down payment, but expect to spend anywhere from 10% to 12% because of those fees. So with him already saying what the down payment is going to be, leads me to believe that he's already spoken with an SBA lender. They already probably have a bank backing this deal contingent on the buyer being qualified. And so that's a good sign, right? The bank's already looked at this and says, yep, looks good, and we'll sign off on it as long as the buyer is still qualified. So that's a good sign. And then the business is an established franchise. So my take on that, everyone's different. I don't have too strong of opinions on it, but you should just know that if you buy a franchise business, you may give up a little bit of control. It's not always the case. I've said that before, and people have come at me about that and said they own a franchise and they have full control. But you're under the franchise, right? And so maybe if you want to run ideas, you have to run them up the ladder. If you want to implement ideas, I should say, you have to run them up the ladder, or whatever it is. But you are getting back-end support. You're getting huge brand recognition. You might have sales support, marketing support. So with a franchise, you may be giving up a little bit of control, but you're getting a ton of support. And if you don't buy a franchise, you're not getting any support, but you have full control. That's my take on a franchise. Again, all franchise models are different, and you're also going to be paying a franchise fee. Whether it's a one-time fee or a royalty fee, you will be paying a franchise fee. So that's another thing to keep in mind. That would probably be the second thing that I would want to look at on this business after I sign an NDA is give me more information on the owners and the employees of the business, and then let me take a closer look at this franchise model and what their fees are on business. So overall, I like this business. I like this listing. There's a lot of information here, which is good. I think it's priced accurately. I like the industry. I do see some growth potential with those additional services. Maybe we can increase marketing, right? I don't know about geographical expansion so much, but overall, this is a really good listing and really good business. My big concerns are ownership and the employees. I would really want to know who these employees are, how long they've been there, what are their roles, who are the key employees of the business. So I would put a heavy focus on that aspect on this listing. Now, real quick here before I finish up, I do want to show you what it looks like to crunch the numbers. So our purchase price was $1,195,000. Now, if we are going to be putting $141,000 down, which he said that's what we would be doing, I'm assuming that that's not working capital, and it's the fees for the SBA loan. That's going to be 10% plus about $20,000 in fees, right? And the fees obviously don't count towards our loan payments. They're just fees. So we're still going to have a loan amount of $75,000 over $1 million, right? So here's our purchase price. Here's the loan that we are going to carry. And here's the total down payment with fees included, which is nice that we have that, is $141,000. So we're going to put $141,000 of our own money down. We're going to carry this loan, and then the business was doing $363,000 in cash flow. And our annual debt payments on this loan up here going to come out to roughly $170,000. And I just use a simple SBA loan calculator. This is the website if you want to use it, or just Google SBA loan calculator. There's a few different places you can play around with it. Now, the way I did that was I took our loan amount that was right here, right? So we're already putting our 141 down, and we're gonna have to carry the rest of this as debt. So that's our loan amount. And then the interest rate is 10% as of now, today's date. SBA interest rates are usually a point or 2 points above the prime rate, meaning 1 or 2% above the prime rate. I just put in 10. I think right now it's 7.5 prime rate. So 8, 9.5. I just rounded up and put 10, right? So this potentially could be even a little lower. And then a 10-year term, that's a pretty typical term length for an SBA loan. So we're looking at roughly, again, these are rough numbers, $14,000 monthly and then $170,000 annually. So if our annual debt payments back to the bank are $170,000, that means for 10 years, if cash flow stays the same, if we don't increase cash flow at all, or I guess if cash flow decreases, which would be a bad thing, but if cash flow stayed the exact same for 10 years straight, we would have a difference of $193,000. Now that includes owner compensation as well. So that's the cash flow or the SDE of the business. So it's a pretty good number. It's priced pretty fair in my opinion. But again, it's not all about the numbers. We need to know about those employees. We need to know about what the ownership in the business is doing and how involved they are and what do the franchise fees look like and what are the growth opportunities and how realistic are they. There are 101 questions to still ask here, but if you just crunch some very, very, very high level, rough ballpark numbers, this is what you're looking at. So this is a really good number. And if you want to make an assumption that you can grow the business 5% every year, then this 193 is just going to keep going up and up and up, which is a good sign. But you have to keep that cash flow there. And in order to determine if we can keep that cash flow at 363 or higher, we need to look at other things that make up not just the numbers. Like I've mentioned several times, the employees. What is the customer concentration? What is the revenue breakdown of services, right? Is it all coming from lawn care? Is it all coming from pest control? Where is the revenue coming from? Is it spread out evenly? Who's responsible for bringing all this revenue in? Are they staying there with the business? Will they sign an employee contract with the business? So there is a lot to uncover here still, but all in all, I would say this looks like a really good listing. I don't live in Kentucky. Otherwise, I would maybe take a look at it. I always think it's a good idea to buy within your backyard, within your state, unless you have an operator that's going to be in that state that could take care of it for you. I just think it's a good idea to be fairly close to the business, and the SBA will also think it's a good idea as well. They're the ones approving the loan. So I like this business. I would definitely check it out if I was in Kentucky. Numbers look good. Everything looks good. So if you have any questions on looking at businesses, what to look for, deal reviews, just leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. And I appreciate you watching. Thank you.